You are going through the worst day of your life. It could be that a romantic partner just ended things with you. It could be that your supervisor embarrassed you in front of everyone at the office. It could be that you dropped your phone face down onto concrete and watched the screen break apart gradually as if it stood for your whole existence falling apart. You come home without saying a single word because there is no need to speak. Your dog, who has honestly spent the past 8 hours napping hard on the couch in positions that would alarm any chiropractor, walks over at once, places his head in your lap, and looks at you with those huge, silly, and impossibly warm eyes. How did he know? You did not cry out loud. You did not explain anything. You barely made a sound. You walked through the door, set down your bag, and something in the air changed. He sensed it before you even sat down. That moment is more than simply heartwarming. It is more than just thinking what a good boy he is. It is one of the most scientifically interesting things that happens on this planet every day. Almost nobody treats it with enough seriousness to investigate it carefully. The question of whether animals truly know when a human is sad may sound like the kind of thing stitched onto a decorative pillow next to a picture of a golden retriever. It seems cute and sentimental, rather than something examined in research. Yet beneath that soft, fluffy surface, the question reaches the very center of consciousness, emotion, communication between species, and what it means to feel something in a body that is not yours. It involves evolutionary biology, neuroscience, animal cognition, and the 15,000-year experiment that changed both humans and dogs forever. So we will answer it properly with science. We start with something that took researchers an embarrassingly long time to admit out loud. Animals have emotions. I call the delay embarrassing because if you have ever owned a pet, you probably figured this out within the first 48 hours. There is the joy when you get home, the sulking when you leave, and the very specific look of betrayal your cat gives you when you open a can that turns out to be chickpeas. Science, with its cautious approach, needed roughly a century of careful, observation-controlled studies and many heated conference debates before it was willing to put that conclusion on paper. For most of the 20th century, the dominant view in biology was behaviorism. The idea was that animals were essentially biological machines. They did not feel things. They reacted to stimuli. A dog wagging its tail was not expressing joy. It was executing a hardwired behavioral response pattern linked to social bonding situations. The description was very clinical, very tidy, and very much how someone who has never owned a dog would describe a dog. The shift came gradually, and it came from multiple directions at once. Researchers studying great apes in the field started noticing things that were genuinely difficult to explain away. Chimpanzees who lost companions would go through prolonged periods of lethargy, social withdrawal, reduced eating, and something that looked remarkably like what we would call depression. Elephants would return to the bones of deceased herd members years later, sometimes traveling significant distances to do so, and touch them gently with their trunks in ways that served absolutely no survival function. Dolphins were observed staying near deceased calves long after any practical reason to do so had passed. None of this fit the biological machine model. Machines do not grieve. Machines do not make detours to visit the dead. Then came neuroscience, and it changed everything. When researchers looked carefully at the brains of mammals, they found something that reframed the entire conversation. The limbic system, the network of brain structures most closely associated with emotional processing in humans, is not a human invention. It is not a uniquely primate development. It is present in varying forms and degrees of complexity across virtually all mammals. Traces of it appear in birds. Elements of it show up even in fish. What that means is staggering when you sit with it. Emotion is not something humans invented or stumbled upon through some miraculous cognitive leap. It is an ancient biological tool, hundreds of millions of years old, that evolution kept because it works. Fear keeps you away from predators. Attachment keeps social animals bonded in groups that survive better than isolated individuals. Grief signals the loss of something that mattered to your survival and motivates behaviors that protect what remains. Emotion is functional, and it is old, far older than us. And if animals have the neurological architecture for emotion, if they have the hardware, so to speak, then the next question becomes obvious. Can they detect those same signals in others? Can they read the emotional state of a being that is not them? The answer, it turns out, is yes. Conclusively, measurably, scientifically, yes. But the how is where things get genuinely mind-blowing. Let us talk about smell. Specifically, let us talk about your dog's nose, because this is where dogs go from adorable and loyal companions to walking biological supercomputers that are casually doing things we barely understand. A dog's nose contains roughly 300 million olfactory receptors. A human nose contains about 6 million. Now you might hear that and think, okay, dogs have a better sense of smell. I knew that. But the gap here is not like comparing a good swimmer to an excellent swimmer. It is like comparing someone who can see a candle to someone who can detect a single candle flame from 80 kilometers away on a clear night. Dogs are not experiencing a slightly sharper version of your olfactory world. They are experiencing a fundamentally different relationship with chemical reality. When you walk into a room, you see a room. A dog reads the entire chemical history of every person and animal who has been there, cross-referenced with their health status, emotional state, recent diet, and stress levels. They are not smelling the same world you are. They are smelling a completely different, infinitely richer one. Now here is where this becomes directly relevant. When you are sad, or when you are experiencing genuine emotional distress, your body does not just feel different, it is chemically different. Your cortisol levels rise, your adrenaline shifts, your heart rate changes, the composition of your sweat changes, your breath changes. These are not subtle, poetic metaphors for emotional states. These are real, physical, measurable, molecular events, producing actual compounds that float off your body into the surrounding air, and your dog is picking up every single one of them. A 2022 study published in the journal PLOS One was specifically designed to test this. Researchers trained dogs to discriminate between breath and sweat samples collected from humans in high-stress states versus calm, relaxed states. No visual cues, no behavioral information, just the chemical signal on a cotton swab. The dogs identified the stressed samples correctly with an accuracy of over 93%. 93% from a cotton swab. Smelling stress like most of us smell coffee. Your dog does not sense your sadness in some vague, mystical animals just know kind of way. Your dog smells your sadness the way you would smell smoke from a fire 2 streets over. It is immediate. It is specific. It is chemical. And by the time you have sat down on that couch, your dog has already received a full biochemical report on your emotional state. But here is the thing. Smell is only one piece of this, because dogs and several other animals have developed something even more extraordinary. On top of that olfactory genius, they have learned to read human faces. This is the part where you should probably sit down because it gets genuinely strange. For somewhere between 15,000 and 40,000 years, depending on which archaeological evidence you trust, dogs have lived alongside humans. Not just in the same general environment, inside our social structures, inside our emotional lives, sleeping next to us, watching us, depending on us, and being depended upon. And over that vast stretch of time, through the relentless patient-blind logic of natural selection, something happened that has no real parallel in the animal kingdom. Dogs evolved specific cognitive adaptations for reading human emotional expressions. Not animal expressions in general, not dog-to-dog body language, human faces specifically. In 2015, a research team from the University of Vienna designed a study to test this precisely. They showed dogs photographs of happy and angry human faces, sometimes only the upper half, sometimes only the lower half, and rewarded them for correctly identifying one emotional category. The faces belonged to strangers, not the dog's owners, people these dogs had never encountered before. The dogs could do it consistently, above chance, with faces they had never seen. More than that, they showed distinct behavioral responses. Faced with angry expressions, they were more hesitant, more guarded, more likely to approach cautiously or not at all. Faced with happy expressions, they were more willing to approach, more relaxed in their posture. They were not just telling the difference. They were interpreting what the difference meant and adjusting their behavior in real time based on that interpretation. Follow-up research produced an even more specific finding. Dogs process human emotional faces using a left gaze bias, meaning they instinctively look first to the right side of a human face, which is the side that most strongly and reliably communicates emotional state in people, due to right hemisphere dominance in emotional expression. This is exactly the same bias that humans use when reading each other's faces. We either taught it to them, or they evolved it alongside us across thousands of years of shared living. Either way, it is a cognitive tool built specifically for navigating human emotional reality. What this means when you add it all together is remarkable. Over millennia of living with us, dogs did not just become physically comfortable in human company. They did not just learn our schedules and our habits. They built an entirely new layer of cognitive machinery, dedicated specialized neural processing specifically for understanding us. They became, in a very real and measurable sense, experts in being with humans. Now, dogs are an obvious case. They have been shaped by thousands of years of selective pressure specifically around human interaction. But what about other animals? What about cats, horses, elephants, or the wild ones that have spent no time in our living rooms at all? Let us start with cats. They deserve the floor. Cats have a reputation somewhat earned for being emotionally indifferent, cool, distant, operating on a private agenda that has nothing to do with you or your feelings. And there is a structural reason for this. Cats were not domesticated for emotional labor. They were domesticated primarily for pest control. The evolutionary contract is different. Dogs were bred to work with humans emotionally and socially. Cats were bred to work near humans while doing their own thing. But do not let that fool you. A study from Oakland University found that cats behave measurably differently around owners who are smiling versus owners who are frowning. Around smiling owners, they were significantly more likely to approach, to purr, to engage in affiliative behaviors like rubbing. Around frowning owners, they were more withdrawn, more cautious, more likely to keep their distance. The key finding this effect was strongest with their own owners and much weaker with strangers, which suggests the cats have not evolved a general-purpose human face reader the way dogs have. What they have done instead is something arguably more intimate. They have built a bespoke, individualized emotional model of their specific person. Your cat has spent years studying you. Your micro-expressions, your particular sounds when you are stressed, your movement patterns when something is wrong. Your cat knows you in specific, personal, accumulated detail, which, when you think about it, might be the deeper form of understanding. Not, I know what humans look like when they are sad, but I know what you look like when you are sad. Horses operate on yet another level entirely. In a 2018 study from the University of Sussex, horses were shown photographs of angry and happy human faces. Hours later, not immediately, hours later, they were introduced to the actual person from the photograph. The person behaved neutrally. No emotional expression either way. Horses who had previously seen the angry photograph showed significantly more wariness around that person than horses who had seen the happy photograph. They remembered the emotional signal. They formed an expectation, and they adjusted their behavior toward a neutral stranger based entirely on an emotional impression made from a photograph hours earlier. That is not reflex. That is not instinct. That is memory-based emotional reasoning applied across time. That is cognition operating in a way we barely give animals credit for. Let us go further. Let us go to the wild. Elephants are neurologically and behaviorally among the most emotionally sophisticated animals we have ever studied. They console each other in distress. They have specific vocalizations associated with greeting long-absent companions that researchers describe carefully as sounding like joy. They mourn their dead in ways that have no survival function, returning to remains touching them, lingering. And here is what makes them relevant to this conversation. Elephants in the wild have been documented responding to the distress signals of other species, not just other elephants. Other animals in distress nearby. Younger elephants in particular have been observed approaching distressed animals of different species in what researchers describe as investigative calm and apparently reassuring behavior. They extend their empathetic response across biological lines when the signals are clear enough. This is important because it means that empathy, the capacity to detect and respond to the emotional state of another being, is not inherently species-locked. It can operate across boundaries when the signal is legible. And if it can cross from elephant to other animal, there is no principled reason it cannot cross from animal to human. We may simply be the distressed creature nearby. And some animals, the ones who have lived with us longest or the ones with the deepest empathic capacity, have learned to read our particular frequency. Let us come back to that couch. We have established the mechanisms, but there is one more layer that almost never gets discussed, and it might be the most important one. It is not just detection, it is response. Deliberate, regulated, intentional response. In 2018, researchers at Johns Hopkins University set up a test with dogs and their distressed owners separated by a transparent door with a simple magnetic latch the dog could push open. Half the owners expressed distress, crying using a distressed tone. Half hummed quietly. The dogs whose owners were crying were significantly more likely to open the door. But the extraordinary detail is this. Those dogs opened the door more slowly and more calmly than the others. Not frantically, not in a panic, deliberately. And then they went directly to their owner. The researchers' interpretation was striking. The dogs appeared to be actively regulating their own emotional arousal in order to be more present and useful to the human in distress. They were managing themselves so they could help you better. That is not an automatic response. That is not a reflex. That is something that looks unsettlingly close to compassion, to conscious choice, to reading a situation and deciding what it needs. Now, and this matters, let us be honest about what we still do not know. Science can measure behavior. It can measure neurochemistry. It is genuinely profoundly limited when it comes to answering the question underneath all of this. What does it feel like from the inside? When your dog comes to you when you are crying, is there something it is like to be your dog in that moment? Is there something we would recognize as concern, as care, as love, or is it a very sophisticated pattern-matching system? Stress signals detected, approach behavior executed, reinforcement received, with nothing we would call genuine experience behind it. Honestly, we do not know. Subjective experience is the hardest thing in the universe to verify from the outside. It is genuinely, philosophically hard. But here's the counter-argument I would offer anyone reaching for pure mechanism as an explanation. The brain structures associated with emotion in humans are present in dogs, cats, horses, and elephants. The behavioral responses we observe during human distress map exactly onto what we would predict if empathy were driving them. The responses are not random. They are targeted, context-appropriate, and in the case of the door-opening study, actively self-regulated. The animals most skilled at detecting human sadness are not running away from it. They are coming toward it calmly, with apparent intention. At some point, when something looks like empathy, acts like empathy, involves the same neural structures as empathy, produces the same outcomes as empathy, and does so across thousands of individual observations in controlled conditions, the burden of proof shifts. You are not proving it is emotion anymore. You are explaining why, against all of that evidence, it somehow is not. There is one last thing worth saying here. Something that does not live in any journal article, but that anyone who has ever been genuinely deeply sad will recognize the moment they hear it. Animals do not try to fix you. When you are sad, really sad, the kind of sad that does not have a solution, most humans do not know what to do with that. They offer advice. They try to reframe things. They tell you it could be worse, that you will feel better soon, that at least you have your health, that everything happens for a reason. They are uncomfortable with your pain, and they want very urgently to make it stop, partly for you, partly for themselves. Your dog does not do any of that. Your dog just stays. No agenda, no discomfort with the weight of your feelings, no need to move the situation forward or reach resolution. Just warm, physical, completely unconditional presence right there in the mess of it with you. And maybe that is the deepest thing to take from all of this. The animals that are most skilled at detecting our emotional states are also the animals most capable of simply being in them with us. Not fixing, not explaining, not moving on, just noticing and coming close. So do animals know when a human is sad? Yes, unambiguously. The evidence is extensive and specific. Dogs detect it with biochemical precision through an olfactory system that makes ours look like a broken flashlight. They read it in human faces, using cognitive tools that evolved over thousands of years specifically for that purpose. Cats build individualized emotional maps of their particular humans through years of close observation. Horses encode emotional memories and act on them hours later. Elephants extend empathetic responses across species, lines reaching toward distress that is not even their own. And some of them, when they find it, do not just know. They respond calmly, deliberately, in ways that look by every measure we have like care. We share this planet with creatures who have spent millions of years developing the capacity to feel, and thousands of years developing the capacity to feel, for us specifically. That is not a small thing. That is one of the most extraordinary facts about being alive in a world full of other living things. Your dog did not fix your bad day. He did not try to. He just put his head in your lap, and he stayed. And somewhere in that gesture, ancient, precise cross-species and completely without words, was something every human being understands the moment it happens. You were seen. You were not alone. And for a creature that could not explain any of that, he understood every